Hi everyone, welcome to the 17th episode of Daily Word Webs to Bell the Cat. If words could kill, well, they could, right? They can, they do already, in fact, right? Especially in these days, we do believe that yeah, words can be some really powerful items in a person's arsenal, and they can really hurt. You should be very careful. Anyhow, वहाँ पे नहीं जाएंगे हम लोग. The reason I brought in the word kill here as part of this remark is because it relates to one of the roots that we'll be discussing today. Cide stands for kill and necro stands for death. I'm Anupam Mishra, by the way. मेरा introduction और मेरे credentials के बारे में मैं आपको session के end में बताऊंगा. For now, let's just jump into the content. Okay, so guys, Necro, the first root that we have at hand today, that we'll be discussing today, comes from the Greek language, and the second one, cide, comes from the Latin language. Okay, the first one stands for death, the second one stands for kill, and there are other similar roots. So one of them we have discussed, discussed in the last episodes, right? Mort and Thanatos. Thanatos also stands for death. Okay, so yeah, so let's start. This wrestler, named क्या था नाम Undertaker, as part of the World Wrestling Entertainment, जो show आपका आता था, show or whatever you call it. पहले भी आता था, and I think it's still running probably. I'm not like aware of it. And then in this whole setup of the program, WWE, every wrestler would have some sort of persona, right? Some sort of style, एक होगा हर किसी का. And this wrestler Undertaker, would kind of have a fearful persona where he would strike fear into the hearts of the opposing wrestler. Something that relates to, he kind of had a persona which would make it seem like that he knows he has some connections with the supernatural, or kind of maybe practices black magic or something. At least at least it seemed to be that way, right? The way the whole thing was, his entry and everything was characterized. So the music and all. So and then that's basically what our first word relates to today, guys, which is necromancer. Necromancer is basically a person who claims involvement with the supernatural, or like practices magic, or specifically black magic. Okay, so and it derives from two roots. The first root is obviously necro. The second one, mancer, comes from the root mantia, MANTEIA, which stands for divination. Now, what is divination? Divination is basically the practice of trying to seek knowledge of the future by using some supernatural means, right? So that will be divination for you. So a necromancer would be like someone who uses black magic to gain knowledge about the future, or maybe someone who's involved in black magic or claims to be involved in black magic, right? So that's the term necromancer for you. There are further some other terms that are similar, not exactly the same, but they are similar to this. For example, chiromancer. And I'm sure like chiromancy as a practice is something that you must have been engaged in directly or indirectly at some point in your life, and I'll tell you how. मैं आपको roots का meaning बताता हूँ पहले. Mancy obviously comes from mancia, which means divination, to try and figure out something about the future, or some knowledge that is not available to people generally. And the first part, Cairo, it stands for, in Greek, it stands for hand, right? So a chiromancer would basically be a person who looks at your palm, who looks at the lines on your palm in your hand, and then tries to tell you about your future or about your characteristics as a person, basis what he sees in the palm, right? So he reads the palm. A palmist would be a chiromancer, and the practice of doing that would be considered as pyromancy. Chiromancy would be a chiromancer, and the practice of doing that would be considered as chiromancy. Pyromancy is something different. Pyromancy would be like a situation when the ये shows आपके काफी सारे आते हैं ना, when you have this one very eclectic character, who is into divination, who's into prophesizing or predicting the future, जिसके पास जो आपकी जो main characters हैं, every once in a while they go to them and ask them कि हाँ please बताइए, advice दीजिए कि क्या करना चाहिए, especially series which are set in like really old times or mythological times. For example, Game of Thrones में, you'd have like some characters who can look at the far and try to maybe predict something, right? That practice will be known as pyromancy. Okay, where pyromancy, where pyro is basically the root for fire. Okay, again the Greek root for fire. And mancy, well, it's the same root that has been used for necromancer and chiromancer. And the person who obviously, you know, undertakes this practice would be a pyromancer. Okay, so take care. So necromancer, chiromancer, pyromancer. Let's move on to the next term, which is necrophilia. Necrophilia, kind of an unsavory term, what is a term that is used for, well, first of all, look at what it derives from. Necro means death, and philia comes from the root phil, a root that we'll take up very soon in one of the upcoming episodes, that stands for love, right? So necrophilia would literally mean love for the dead. And however, it has kind of a very negative connotation, extremely negative connotation. Like, it is used for someone who's obsessed or has an obsession or erotic interest towards dead bodies, right? Like who's kind of obsessed or like kind of likes to get involved with dead bodies on a more intimate level, right? Very unsavory, as you can imagine. So that's necrophilia for you. Another term which is again probably as unsavory, if not less, would be necrophagia. Necrophagia is the part phag. This part comes from phag is the root for eating or consuming. Okay, it's a root for eating something or consuming something. Okay, and hence you can now imagine what necrophagia stands for. Necrophagia would be the practice where a person, you know, engages in the act of eating dead matter, dead organic matter, dead bodies, right? Parts of dead bodies. In fact, this is a practice that probably is known to be part of certain rites, maybe rituals, I don't know. Probably not rites or rituals, but it is definitely carried out by certain groups in certain parts of the world. So that's necrophagia for you. Necrophagia. That's okay. So that's about necrophilia. Necrophagia is something that we have covered. Another term from necro that we can get is necropolis. Okay. Now, necro obviously comes from the root necro. The first part comes from the root necro, that stands for death, and polis is a Greek term for city. Okay. So necropolis would essentially be the city of the dead, right? So it's generally a term that is used for a cemetery where dead bodies are buried, right? Buried. So that would be a necropolis, a city of the dead, generally. So yeah, so that's about necropolis. Let's move on to the next term, which will be necrophobia. So the way you have necrophilia, something that is quite opposite to that would be necrophobia. Necrophobia is basically the case when someone is excessively afraid of death or of dead bodies. Okay, so we all have a normal fear of death and a natural fear of death, which is all right. But necrophobia is something that is just on a different level, right? In terms of like so much fear of death, so much so that it affects the person in terms of not being able to carry out their daily routines, right? वो अपना रोजमर्रा का काम नहीं कर पाते, इतना उनको paranoid हो जाते हैं. So that's necrophobia for you. Another term that I think we have probably discussed, the other term for this in one of the earlier sessions was thanatophobia, right? Thanatophobia also means something similar, right? Excessive fear of the death. The first part of the word thanato comes from the root thanatos, which stands for death. Okay, so yeah, that's necrophobia and thanatophobia. Let's move on to the next term, which is homicide. Homicide is basically an act of a human killing another human being. The second root, cide, comes from the root. The second part of the word comes from this root cide, that stands for kill, and the first part, which is homin. Okay, and the first part is homi, homi, that comes from the root homin, that stands for man. Not like the gender-wise man, like not just the male, but man in general, like human. And it's the Latin term. Homin is a Latin term that stands for man. So homicide would be like the killing of a human being, right? So man, the word man in this case has been used like for both genders, like for humans and in general. So that's homicide for you. You must have seen ये काफी बार ये आपके जो TV shows होते हैं where you almost in every case you have the FBI, some unit of FBI doing something. So in most of these shows that are created, And whenever they report some crime, okay, there's been a, what do they say? They say there's been a homicide on that 84th street or this street, that street, and then they go on and investigate all the causes and everything, right? So homicide that's the context in which you must have seen homicide quite often. So from homicide, there's another term that we can discuss, which will be genocide. In fact, this is a term that we have discussed in the past. Genocide, like the atrocities committed, for example, by Hitler, by the Nazis, on the Jews, would be considered as an example of genocide, right? Genocide is basically the deliberate killing of a large number of people, or a race of people of a particular nation or ethnic group, with the aim of destroying them completely, right? They are wiping them out of the face of earth. So that's genocide. Horrific examples exist in the past in our history for unfortunate reasons. So that's homicide. Terms from homicide, genocide, or I think there are a few other terms that we'll be looking at the root cide even in more detail. You can have a long list of words: patricide, matricide, fratricide, etc., which we'll look into later on. For now, let's move on to the next term, which is pesticide. Now guys, the term pest, the first part of this term derives from the Latin term pestis, which stands for maybe some sort of a disease, okay, some sort of a disease, or maybe some sort of a plague, okay. So pesticide would be any substance that is used to kill organisms that cause that disease, pathogens that cause that disease, right? So that pose harm to the crops. Usually it used in the case of agricultural practices, like pesticides are chemicals that are used to kill the pests, kill the insects who might destroy the crops or destroy the farmer's produce. Okay, so so that's pesticides. Another term that is used is insecticides, right? Insecticides would also be a set of chemicals which are used to kill the insects that might pose harm to the crops. So that's about insecticide, pesticide. One last term, I think I just used this here, मैंने pathogen हमने use किया ना, pathogen. So pathogen, pathos is the root for suffering, okay, or feeling or suffering. And gen is the root for generating something or to cause something or to give birth to something. So a pathogen is basically that gives rise to suffering. So that's why you have these microorganisms that cause diseases are known as pathogens, by the way. Okay, so that's I think that's all we have for so far as the words are concerned. Let's move on to the next part. This part of the video, guys, you're simply supposed to pause the video pause करके, because मैं सारे sentences यहाँ पे read नहीं कर रहा हूँ. I want to keep the video short. Pause the video and go through the usage instances of each of these sentences, and we have tried to derive these so far as possible from some reliable resources, all of these sentence usages of these words, right? So that they might be of some good benefit for you. So yeah. And finally, this is where you test yourself. Simply need to find out the correct order of sentences here to match the words on the left side, which will remain fixed. The link to attempt the test, you can also attempt this in the form of a Google form, and the link to the Google form has been provided in the video description. And the summary, guys, as you can see, these are the roots and words that we discussed in today's session on a primary and a secondary basis. So you can pause the PPT and वापस आप इसको एक बार pause करके याद करने की कोशिश कर सकते हैं कि are you able to recall what the meaning of the roots listed here is, and the meaning of the words as well. Okay. Finally, guys, I'm Anupam Mishra, and I'm Lucknow alumnus. These are my areas of work and expertise. These are the brands that I've worked with, and these are my CAT credentials. I've also worked as an academy educator in the past, recognized by the Johnny Ivy Award for best course design and delivery. And so that's about me. Sluggers, guys, we are a growing channel. मैं यहाँ पे काफ़ी सारी जो दिक्कतें हैं यहाँ पे टेस्ट प्रेप में मैं उनको एड्रेस करने की कोशिश कर रहा हूँ sluggers के द्वारा। एंड बिकॉज वी आर अ ग्रोइंग चैनल, हमें आपके पूरे सपोर्ट की ज़रूरत होगी। तो अगर आपको हमारा कंटेंट और डिलीवरी अच्छा लगता है देन डू like and subscribe, like the videos and subscribe to the channel and share it with anyone who you think might benefit from these. आपके लिए शायद वो एक सिंपल सा क्लिक या एक बटन रहता होगा, बट फॉर अ ग्रोइंग चैनल इट मेक्स अ बिग इट मेक्स अ बिग डिफरेंस फॉर अस, सो प्लीज डू दैट। अगर आप नेक्स्ट वीडियो देखना चाहते हैं तो आप यहाँ क्लिक कर सकते हैं, एंड इफ यू वांट टू गो टू द वेरी फर्स्ट वीडियो ऑफ द सीरीज जो अगर आपने नहीं देखा हो तो आप यहाँ क्लिक करके आगे जा सकते हैं। ओके, सो दैट्स अबाउट इट फ्रॉम माय साइड, थैंक यू।